Riverbend, Missouri, is one of those small towns that seems stuck in time. With a population of just over 5,000, it is nestled in the picturesque Ozark Valley, surrounded by forests and crossed by a winding river that gave the town its name. Here, everyone knows each other. News spreads faster than the morning mist over the water, and family stories and scandals become part of the local folklore for decades. Ashley Hart checked the time on her watch, 7:15 a.m., and sighed as she looked at the empty half of the bed. Daniel had left for work early again. Over the past 3 months, it had become a habit, which he explained by his new responsibilities at Riverbend Timber, where he had recently been promoted to production manager. 15 years of marriage had taught Ashley to sense when something was wrong, and now that intuition was screaming danger. When did everything change? She asked herself as she mechanically made coffee for one. Once, she and Daniel had breakfast together every morning, discussing their plans for the day and sharing their dreams. But over the past year, something had broken. At first, it was subtle. More silence at dinner, less physical contact, constant fatigue. Then came the long hours at work, the unanswered phone calls, and the strange messages that Daniel always hurried to hide from her view. In the teacher's lounge at Riverbend High School, Ashley placed her mug with the school logo on the table and turned on her computer. "You look tired," said Judy Pearson, Ashley's math teacher and closest friend at school. "Problems with Daniel again?" "I just didn't get enough sleep," Ashley lied, even though she knew Judy wouldn't believe her. In a small town like Riverbend, it was hard to keep secrets, especially from coworkers you saw 5 days a week. "Are you ready for the family gathering this weekend?" Judy changed the subject. "I heard your niece Caitlyn is back in town." Ashley nodded. Caitlyn's arrival was the only good news in months. Her older sister Maggie's daughter had graduated from college in St. Louis and returned to Riverbend to find herself. That was how she explained her unexpected decision to give up the big city for a job at the local coffee shop, Morning Mist. "Yes, she's changed a lot in the last 4 years," Ashley replied. "I hardly recognized her when we met last week." What Ashley didn't mention was how strange Daniel had acted when she mentioned Caitlyn's return. He dropped his fork during dinner and then quickly changed the subject. He had never shown much interest in his niece before. She was just a quiet teenager who sometimes spent the summer at their house. What could have changed? At Morning Mist, Caitlyn Foster was wiping down tables before opening when the doorbell rang. "Sorry, we're not open yet," she began without looking up, but stopped when she saw who had entered. "Uncle Daniel." Daniel Hart glanced quickly over his shoulder before closing the door behind him. "Hi, Caitlyn. I thought I'd catch you before your shift started." The tension in the air was so thick you could almost touch it. Caitlyn nervously tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, a gesture Ashley would have recognized as her own. Genetics sometimes plays strange tricks, passing little things down through the generations. "We shouldn't be meeting like this," Caitlyn said quietly, taking a step back. "Aunt Ashley might find out. I just wanted to make sure that we understand each other before the family gathering," Daniel said quietly but insistently. "No one must suspect anything. It would destroy the family." "I know," Caitlyn said, lowering her eyes. "I'm not going to say anything, but this can't go on forever, Daniel." "We'll talk after the meeting," he promised. "I have a plan. Just trust me, okay?" When he left, Caitlyn leaned against the counter and took a deep breath. She had returned to Riverbend not just out of nostalgia or a desire to find herself. She had come back for him, for the words spoken last summer during her brief visit home, for the looks and touches that should never have happened, for the promises she was beginning to suspect he would never keep. At the Foster home on the outskirts of town, Maggie was arranging photos on the mantelpiece. The family gathering was a tradition started by her parents, an annual occasion for all the relatives to get together, share news, celebrate successes, and support each other in difficult times. This year, the gathering was at her house, and Maggie wanted everything to be perfect. "Mom, where should I put these chairs?" asked her son Jason, a teenager with the same auburn hair as Caitlyn. "In the living room, next to the sofa," Maggie replied, looking thoughtfully at a photo of her and her sister Ashley standing together with their arms around each other in front of a lake. That was 5 years ago, before the strange tension had developed between them. Maggie couldn't say exactly when it had changed, but she felt that her sister had grown distant, especially in the last year. Maggie's phone rang. Ashley's name lit up on the screen. "Hi, sis," Maggie replied as naturally as she could. "How's the prep for the teacher conference going?" "Fine." Ashley's voice sounded tense. "Maggie, I need to ask you, have you noticed anything strange about Daniel's behavior lately?" Maggie froze. Her heart skipped a beat. "Strange? What do you mean?" "I don't know. Has he said anything about problems at work? Or other things?" "No, nothing like that." Maggie squeezed the phone tighter. "What's going on?" "I'm probably just being paranoid," Ashley sighed. "Never mind. Do we need to bring anything to the meeting?" "Just ourselves and Daniel," Maggie replied, relieved to change the subject. "And good vibes." Hanging up, Maggie glanced at the clock. Her daughter should be home from work in an hour. They needed to talk before the family meeting. Something was brewing, and Maggie could feel a storm coming. At the Riverbend Sheriff's Office, James Warren was reviewing the week's reports. 25 years in law enforcement had taught him to sense trouble before it arose, and right now, that sense was unsettling. "Sheriff, Daniel Hart is here to see you," said Susan, the dispatcher and secretary. "Send him in." Warren put down his papers. Daniel wasn't a frequent visitor to the sheriff's office, which made this visit even more intriguing. Daniel entered, nervously fiddling with his car keys. "Jim, we need to talk. Off the record." "Have a seat." The sheriff pointed to a chair. "What's going on?" "I've been getting strange messages." Daniel took out his phone and showed the screen. "Someone knows about personal things, and they're threatening to tell." The sheriff read the message. "I know what's going on between you two. Either you end it, or everyone will find out the truth at the family gathering." "When did you get the first message?" Warren asked, maintaining a professional calm. 3 days ago, from an unknown number." "And what truth are we talking about?" The sheriff watched Daniel's reaction closely. Daniel looked away. "I have no idea. Maybe it's a mistake or a prank." Warren had been a cop too long not to notice the lie. "Daniel, I can't help you if you don't tell me the whole truth." "It's just a misunderstanding," Daniel said, standing up. "Forget I came. I'll handle it myself." When the door closed behind him, Sheriff Warren looked thoughtfully at the phone number he had written down. Something was going on in the Hart family, and his intuition told him it wasn't going to end well. That evening, Ashley sat in her car across from the Morning Mist coffee shop. She had come to talk to Caitlyn, but now she wasn't sure. What would she say? "I suspect my husband is hiding something, and for some reason, I think you know what it is." It sounded ridiculous even in her own head. And yet, there was something about the way Daniel reacted when Caitlyn's name came up, the way he constantly checked his phone, the unfamiliar cologne she sometimes smelled on his shirts. Making up her mind, Ashley got out of the car and headed for the coffee shop. Caitlyn was just closing up, turning the sign on the door. "Aunt Ashley," she exclaimed in surprise. "What are you doing here so late? I wanted to talk." Ashley tried to smile. "Alone." Caitlyn swallowed nervously but nodded, opening the door. "Sure, come in." They sat down at a table in the back. Caitlyn looked tense, her hands trembling slightly. "How are you settling in?" Ashley began. "Do you miss the big city?" "Sometimes," Caitlyn admitted. "But my family is here, and some things that keep me here." "What things?" Ashley watched her niece's expression closely. "Just memories, friends." Caitlyn looked away. "Aunt Ashley, is something wrong? You look upset." Ashley took a deep breath. "Caitlyn, have you seen Daniel since you came back to town?" The pause before her answer was too long. "Of course, at your family dinner 2 weeks ago." "And besides that?" The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Both women turned and saw Maggie, Caitlyn's mother, with a worried expression on her face. "There you are," she said, looking from her daughter to her sister. "I've been trying to call you both." "Mom!" Caitlyn looked almost frightened. "What are you doing here?" "I was looking for you," Maggie said, stepping closer. "Ashley, I didn't expect to see you here." The tension in the air was palpable. The three women stared at each other, each with her own secrets and suspicions. The family reunion was in 2 days, and it seemed like everyone in this family was hiding something. "I just stopped by for a coffee," Ashley lied, getting up. "I'm leaving." "No, stay," Maggie said unexpectedly firmly. "The three of us need to talk, before the reunion." Outside the coffee shop, it started to rain, the drops tapping on the glass as if counting down the time until an inevitable disaster. In the small town of Riverbend, a storm was brewing that would change the lives of everyone involved forever. Raindrops drummed on the roof of the morning mist coffee shop, creating an almost hypnotic rhythm. At a table in the back, 3 women sat in silence, each lost in her own thoughts. Maggie was the first to break the silence. "Caitlyn, lock the door," she said without taking her eyes off her sister. Caitlyn obediently stood up, turned the sign on the door, locked it, and returned to the table. Her hands were shaking so noticeably that she hid them under the table. "What did you want to talk about, Maggie?" Ashley asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "About what's destroying our family." Maggie took her phone out of her bag and placed it on the table. "About secrets that can't stay secrets forever." Ashley felt her heart begin to beat faster. "What do you mean?" Maggie unlocked her phone and showed the screen to her sister. It was a text document with dates and times. Coffee shop, 7:15 a.m. Park by the river, 5:30 p.m. Pine Grove Motel, room 8, 2 p.m. Ashley frowned in confusion, but then her gaze shifted to Caitlyn, who was sitting with her head down, as if she couldn't bring herself to meet her aunt's eyes. "I started keeping this diary 3 weeks ago," Maggie continued, "when I noticed how often Daniel accidentally ended up in the same place as Caitlyn." "Mom, please," Caitlyn said quietly. "No, dear, enough lies." Maggie turned to her sister. "Ashley, I don't know how to say this, but there's something going on between your husband and my daughter. Something inappropriate." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Ashley felt as if the room had begun to spin. The suspicions she had been pushing away for weeks, months, suddenly took shape and weight. "How long?" was all she could ask. Caitlyn finally looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Last summer, when I came home for vacation." "Last summer?" Ashley could hardly breathe. "You were 23 and he was 41. You're our niece, Caitlyn." "I know," Caitlyn whispered. "I didn't plan it. We didn't plan it. It just happened." "Just happened?" Ashley's voice trembled with anger and pain. "Cheating doesn't just happen, Caitlyn. It's a choice that both of you made." Maggie put her hand on her sister's shoulder. "Ashley, I know this is awful. I only found out 2 weeks ago. Caitlyn didn't come back to town for no reason. Daniel promised her he'd leave you." Ashley let out a sound that was part laughter, part sobbing. 15 years of marriage? 15 years? And he was just going to leave? For my sister's niece? "I overheard their conversation," Maggie continued. "Daniel said he had a plan, but he needed time to arrange everything. Something about money and a new start." "Money?" Ashley suddenly remembered the strange transactions from their joint account that Daniel had explained as investments in a business. "He's taking our savings." "Aunt Ashley," Caitlyn tried to take her hand, but Ashley pulled away. "He loves me, and I love him. We didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't want to hurt me?" Ashley shook her head. "How did you plan to do that? Announce at a family gathering that my husband is now with my niece? And expect me to say, 'Oh, how lovely, be happy together'?" "I sent the messages," Maggie confessed, "to scare Daniel, to make him stop. I thought if I threatened to expose him at the meeting, he'd get scared and leave Caitlyn alone." Ashley remembered how nervous Daniel had been the last few days, how often he had checked his phone. "He went to Sheriff Warren about those messages." "What?" Maggie looked alarmed. "I didn't think he would go to the police. He obviously didn't tell the sheriff the truth about what's going on." Ashley stood up. "You know what? Let everyone know. At the meeting, let the whole family see who Daniel Hart and Caitlyn Foster really are." On the day of the family meeting, the Foster home was decorated, the tables were set, and everything was ready to welcome the guests. But the atmosphere was far from festive. Maggie was checking the seating arrangements when her son Jason walked in. "Mom, what's going on? Why is everyone acting so strange?" "What are you talking about, sweetie?" Maggie tried to smile, but it came out unconvincing. Caitlyn didn't sleep at home. You're whispering on the phone. Aunt Ashley isn't answering her messages. Adult problems, Jason. Nothing to worry about. First to arrive were the cousins from Springfield, then Uncle Robert and his wife from Kansas City. Gradually, the house filled with relatives, conversation, and laughter. No one seemed to notice the tension between the hostess and the other main participants in the drama. Ashley arrived alone, entered quietly, and sat down in the corner of the living room, avoiding contact with her sister. She looked pale but calm. Too calm, like the calm before a storm. Daniel arrived later, looking nervous and jumpy. He nodded to a few relatives, took a glass of wine, and stood by the window, glancing constantly at the door. Caitlyn was still nowhere to be seen. "Where's your daughter?" Ashley whispered, approaching her sister in the kitchen. "I don't know." Maggie looked worried. "She hasn't answered her phone since this morning. Maybe they decided to run away." Ashley took a sip from her glass. "Cowards. Or something happened." Maggie looked at Ashley. "What did you talk about yesterday in the park?" Ashley raised her eyebrows in surprise. "She told you?" "No, but I saw you from the hospital window. We just talked, like adults." "About what?" "About consequences. About what happens when you ruin other people's lives." Maggie looked at her sister intently. "What did you do, Ashley?" Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. They all turned to see Caitlyn looking exhausted and confused. "Sorry I'm late," she said quietly, avoiding Daniel and Ashley's gaze. Daniel moved toward her but stopped when he saw Maggie's warning glance. "Now that we're all here," Maggie raised her glass, "I propose a toast to family, to truth and honesty." Ashley smiled but raised her glass as well. "To truth, which always comes out in the end." Daniel swallowed nervously, his gaze darting between Caitlyn and Ashley. "Before we continue," Ashley said loudly, stepping into the center of the room, "I'd like to make an announcement." All the relatives fell silent, expecting the usual toast or news of a promotion at work. No one except the main characters in the drama had any idea what was about to happen. "Daniel and I have some big news," Ashley began, her voice steady but her eyes shining with suppressed emotion. 15 years of marriage is a long time. There have been ups and downs. Daniel took a step forward, panic evident on his face. "Ashley..." "No, honey, let me finish." Ashley smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Like I said, 15 years is a long time, and sometimes people stray from that path. They get lost. They start looking for alternative routes." A whisper ran through the room. Relatives exchanged confused glances. "The last year has been particularly difficult," Ashley continued, "and in times like these, people sometimes make unexpected choices. Isn't that right, Daniel?" Daniel paled. Caitlyn, standing at the door, looked as if she was about to faint. "Ashley, maybe not now." Maggie tried to intervene, but her sister just shook her head. "Now is the perfect time, Maggie. The whole family is here." Ashley raised her glass higher. "So, I want to propose a toast to new love, to the passion that makes you forget all your obligations and vows." "Ashley, stop." Daniel took a step toward her. "Stop? But I've only just begun." Ashley turned to the other guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have some news for you. My husband, Daniel Hart, and our dear niece, Caitlyn Foster, are in love, passionately, madly in love. So much so that they plan to run away together, taking our joint savings with them." A dead silence fell over the room. Then a cacophony of voices, questions, and exclamations erupted. "Is this true?" Aunt Martha asked, looking at Daniel. "My God, Caitlyn, he's your uncle," one of the young cousins exclaimed. "Technically, he's my aunt's husband, not a blood relative," Caitlyn replied, immediately realizing that she had just confirmed Ashley's accusations. Daniel stood with his head down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "You're disgusting, both of you," said Uncle Robert, shaking his head. "I think we should leave," muttered Uncle Robert's wife, grabbing her purse. Gradually, the guests began to leave, casting judgmental glances at Daniel and Caitlyn. 15 minutes later, only Maggie, Ashley, Daniel, Caitlyn, and a few close relatives remained in the house, too shocked to leave. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked quietly, approaching Ashley. "You ruined everything." "No, Daniel." Ashley looked him in the eyes. "You ruined everything." The moment you decided you could betray me with her. We love each other." His voice sounded almost pleading. "I didn't want it to turn out this way." "What did you want?" Ashley shook her head. "To ride off into the sunset with her? With my money?" "Our money," Daniel corrected. "And yes, I wanted to start a new life, with Caitlyn." Ashley looked at her niece, who was standing against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "And you, Caitlyn? Did you really think this could end well?" "I loved him," Caitlyn whispered. "I do." "Love," Ashley laughed bitterly. "You know what I told you yesterday in the park? That he would never leave me for you. That you were just a fling, a way to feel young again. And you know what happened this morning? Daniel called me. He begged me to forgive him." Caitlyn looked at Daniel, shock and pain evident on her face. "What?" "Ashley's lying," Daniel said quickly. "I didn't call her." "You didn't call?" Ashley took out her phone and pressed play. Daniel's voice, distorted by the recording but recognizable, filled the room. "Ashley, please. I made a terrible mistake. It was a moment of weakness. Caitlyn means nothing to me. She's just a way to feel young again. I love you. Only you. Let's forget about this and start over." Caitlyn staggered as if she had been struck. "Daniel?" "She made me." Daniel looked cornered. "She threatened to go to the police and say I stole the money." "And you believed her?" Caitlyn shook her head. "You promised me. You said you loved me." "Caitlyn, I loved—" "No." Caitlyn raised her hand, stopping him. "Don't. I understand now. You never meant to be with me. I was just entertainment." "That's not true." Daniel tried to approach her, but Maggie stepped between them. "Don't you come near my daughter." Her voice was quiet but threatening. "Never again." Ashley finished her wine and put down her glass. "Well, I guess the family meeting is over. Thanks for having us, Maggie." She headed for the door but stopped next to Caitlyn. "You know what's the saddest part? I really loved you, like a niece, like part of my family." With those words, Ashley left, leaving behind a ruined relationship and broken hearts. A week had passed since the disastrous family meeting. Riverbend was buzzing with gossip. The story of Daniel Hart's affair with his wife's niece had spread through the small town like wildfire. At the grocery store, mothers covered their children's eyes when Daniel walked by. At Johnny's bar, his usual spot at the bar was empty. No one wanted to sit next to him. Daniel sat in his car in front of the Riverbend timber sawmill, unable to bring himself to go inside. Through the windshield, he could see the workers glancing his way and whispering to each other. Yesterday, the sawmill owner, George Simmons, had called him in for a talk. "Daniel, you're a good manager, but this scandal, customers are calling. Some are threatening to terminate their contracts. Family values mean a lot in our town." He knew that today, he would most likely be fired. 15 years of work would go down the drain, along with 15 years of marriage. And for what? Daniel rested his head on the steering wheel. Caitlyn wasn't answering his calls or texts. Ashley had changed the locks on their house and filed for divorce. Even Maggie, who had always been kind to him, now looked at him with contempt. His phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" Daniel answered cautiously. "Mr. Hart, this is Sheriff Warren. We need to talk." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "About what?" "About financial transactions from your joint account with Ashley. She has filed a report of financial fraud." Daniel closed his eyes. Everything was falling apart faster than he could imagine. "I'll be at your office in 20 minutes. At the Morning Mist coffee shop, Caitlyn mechanically wiped down tables, not noticing that some were already sparkling clean. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights, and her movements were sluggish, like someone on autopilot. "Caitlyn," her boss, Barbara, called out. "I think you need a break, and maybe a vacation." Caitlyn looked up, as if she had just noticed Barbara's presence. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Barbara gently took the rag from her hands. "People are saying, the whole town is talking." "I know what they're saying." Caitlyn smiled bitterly. "That I'm a homewrecker, a seductress, that I have no morals. Sometimes what we think is love turns out to be something else," Barbara said carefully. "Especially when there's such a difference in age and power." "He didn't manipulate me," Caitlyn straightened up. "I'm a grown woman, capable of making my own decisions." "But he was married, and he's your uncle. even if not by blood. You're judging me too. Caitlyn turned away, just like everyone else. I'm just worried about you and your mom. She stopped by yesterday and looked exhausted. Caitlyn sighed. Her relationship with her mother was another casualty of the scandal. Maggie was disappointed and angry, not only at Daniel, but also at her daughter for hiding the truth. At the sheriff's office, Daniel sat across from James Warren, looking at printouts of bank transactions. Over the past 3 months, you've withdrawn nearly $75,000 from your joint account. The sheriff pointed to the documents. Your wife claims this was done without her knowledge or consent. It's my money too, Daniel protested weakly. Under Missouri law, a joint account requires the consent of both spouses for large transactions. Sheriff Warren leaned back in his chair. In addition, Ashley has provided evidence that you intentionally concealed these transactions by forging her signature on several documents. Daniel paled. Sheriff, this is a misunderstanding. A $75,000 misunderstanding? Warren shook his head. This is a serious charge, Daniel. Financial fraud, forgery. The judge could view this as preparation for flight, given the circumstances. What now? I'm not arresting you right now, the sheriff stood up. But you'd better find a lawyer, and I'd recommend returning the money to the account as soon as possible if you still have it. I can't, Daniel whispered. I used it. What for? The house in Colorado, the down payment and a few payments. Sheriff Warren sighed heavily. Then you'd better sell that house and return the money before Ashley files a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. At the Hart home, Ashley methodically packed Daniel's belongings into boxes. The photos of them together went into the trash. Wedding gifts she had always associated with him went into a separate box for charity. 15 years of marriage were packed up and thrown away in a matter of hours. The doorbell interrupted her task. Maggie stood on the doorstep, looking as exhausted as Ashley felt. Can I come in? Maggie asked. Ashley silently stepped aside, allowing her sister to enter. Are you okay? Maggie looked around, noticing the boxes. As okay as I can be, Ashley returned to sorting through her belongings. How are you? Not great. Maggie sat down on the couch. Caitlyn, she won't talk to me. She blames me for ruining everything by telling you. It's not your fault. Ashley threw Daniel's book into a box with such force that it tore through the bottom. They made their choice. They chose to betray us. I'm worried about her. Maggie picked up a photo that had fallen out of the book. Daniel and Ashley on the beach, happy and tanned. She's not eating. She's hardly sleeping. She left work early today. And what do you want me to do? Ashley crossed her arms over her chest. Forgive them? I just want this to be over, so we can start healing. It'll be over when Daniel gives me my money back and gets out of town. Ashley sat down next to her sister. Sheriff Warren says I have a strong case against him. You really want to take this to court? Make it even more public? I want him to pay Maggie. Ashley's voice trembled. Not just for the money, for the betrayal, for the lies, for making me feel like I wasn't good enough, young enough. Maggie took her sister's hand. I understand, I really do, but revenge doesn't bring back stolen time or heal a broken heart. Ashley wiped away an unbidden tear. You've always been wiser than me, big sister. Not wiser. Maggie smiled weakly. Just more time to make mistakes. Ashley stood up and walked over to the window. I saw them together, you know, before you told me, in the park by the river. They were sitting on a bench, holding hands. He looked at her the way he never looked at me, at least not in recent years. Ashley, I don't think it was just a fling for him, Ashley continued without turning around. Caitlyn is young and beautiful, full of energy and enthusiasm. I can see why he... Her voice trailed off. Maggie walked over and hugged her sister from behind. You're young and beautiful too, and smart and kind. This isn't about you, Ashley. It's about his weakness. What did you talk about with Caitlyn in the park? Maggie finally asked. Before the meeting. Ashley pulled away, her eyes darkening. It doesn't matter now. It does, Maggie insisted. She came back a different person after that meeting. Scared. I didn't threaten her. Ashley turned away and went back to the boxes. I just told her the truth. About Daniel. About what he's really like. What is he like? A coward. A liar. Ashley threw another item into the box. A man who would betray anyone for his own gain. I told her about Sarah. Maggie froze. Sarah? His ex? Yes, Ashley nodded. About how he left her pregnant because he wasn't ready for responsibility. How he denied that the child was his, even though the test proved otherwise. Daniel never told me about that. But of course not, Ashley smiled bitterly. He didn't tell anyone. I found out by accident a few years ago. I ran into Sarah in Springfield. She told me everything. And you forgave him? Maggie looked shocked. I believed he had changed, Ashley shook her head. That he was a different person, a better person. But now you think he hasn't changed? I know he hasn't. Ashley looked at her sister. He was going to run away with Caitlyn, start a new life. And when everything came out, he begged me to forgive him. He promised that Caitlyn meant nothing to him, just like Sarah once meant nothing to him. That evening, Caitlyn sat on a bench in the park by the river, staring at the water. The phone in her hand showed several missed calls from Daniel, but she had no intention of calling him back. Ashley's words about Sarah and the baby were stuck in her head. If Daniel could do that to a woman who was expecting his child, what would stop him from doing the same to her? Can I sit down? Daniel's voice made her jump. She hadn't heard him approach. Caitlyn shrugged but didn't object when he sat down next to her. How are you? Daniel asked. How do you think I am? Caitlyn looked at him for the first time in several days. He looked terrible, unshaven with red eyes and rumpled clothes. I know everything seems terrible right now, but we can start over. Daniel tried to take her hand, but Caitlyn pulled away. Somewhere else, where no one knows us. With what money? Caitlyn shook her head. Sheriff Warren spoke to my mother. You spent Ashley's money on a house in Colorado. Now you're facing jail time for fraud. I'll take care of it. Daniel looked annoyed. I'll sell the house, pay back the money. What matters is that I love you, Caitlyn. We can still be together. What about Sarah? Caitlyn asked quietly. Daniel froze. What? Sarah, your ex-girlfriend, the one you left when she was pregnant. Ashley told you, she said, not asking a question. That was a long time ago, Caitlyn. I was young and stupid. You denied that the child was yours. I was scared. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. It was a mistake. I've learned a lot since then. And that's why you're leaving your wife for me? Caitlyn stood up. I don't see any progress, Daniel. This is completely different. Daniel stood up too. With Sarah, it was just a fling. What we have is real. That's what you told Ashley 15 years ago. Caitlyn began to walk away. And you've been telling me the same lie for the past year. Caitlyn, wait. Daniel grabbed her arm. You can't just walk away after everything we've been through. Let me go. Caitlyn tried to break free, but his grip tightened. No, you're going to listen to me. His voice hardened. I lost everything because of you. My job, my reputation, my home. You can't just decide that we're done. Daniel, you're hurting me. Hurting? You don't know what pain is. He pulled her closer. You used me to feel special, and now that things got tough, you're just running away. That's not true. Caitlyn tried to push him away, but Daniel was stronger. I really loved you, until I realized who you really are. Who am I really, Caitlyn? Enlighten me. You're a coward. She finally freed her arm. Who can't take responsibility for his actions. Who always blames others. Who lies to everyone around him, including himself. Daniel's face contorted with anger. You're no better than me. You slept with your aunt's husband behind her back. What does that say about your morals? At least I admit my mistake. Caitlyn took another step back. Goodbye, Daniel. She turned and quickly walked down the path, leaving him standing alone in the gathering twilight. At the Foster house, Maggie waited for her daughter to return, pacing nervously in the living room. When the door finally opened and Caitlyn walked in, Maggie rushed to her. Where have you been? I called you several times. At the park, Caitlyn said, taking off her jacket. I needed to think. Maggie noticed red marks on her daughter's wrist. What are those? Who did that? Caitlyn looked at her hand as if she had just noticed the marks. Daniel, we talked. Did he hurt you? Maggie's face paled with anger. It's nothing. Caitlyn shook her head. He was upset. I told him it was over between us. Maggie hugged her daughter. I'm glad you finally saw him for who he really is, but that doesn't excuse the violence. I know. Caitlyn hugged her mother back. I'm so tired of all this, Mom. The drama, the judgment, the pain. It'll pass. Maggie stroked her hair. We'll get through this together. Suddenly, there was a loud, insistent knock at the door. Maggie and Caitlyn looked at each other. Caitlyn! Daniel's voice was muffled by the door, but he was clearly drunk and aggressive. I know you're in there. Come out. Don't open it, Caitlyn whispered, stepping away from the door. Maggie nodded and took out her phone. I'm calling the sheriff. Open this damn door, Daniel banged harder. We need to talk. Go away, Daniel, Maggie shouted. I'm calling the police. Call whoever you want. The door shook from the impact. I have nothing to lose. You ruined my life. Caitlyn pressed herself against her mother, trembling. He's never been like this before. Because everything was going according to his plan, Maggie said into the phone with the sheriff's dispatcher. Yes, he's trying to break into my house. Please send someone quickly. The banging on the door suddenly stopped. Maggie cautiously approached the window and pulled back the curtain. He's leaving, she said with relief. He's getting in the car. Thank God! Caitlyn sank down onto the sofa. I've never seen him like that. He was like a different person. People show their true colors when they lose control, Maggie said, sitting down next to her daughter. That's the Daniel Ashley knew and feared. Caitlyn nodded, suddenly realizing how little she knew about the man she had planned to spend her life with. I was so naive, Mom. We're all naive sometimes, Maggie hugged her daughter. The important thing is that we learn from our mistakes. A drizzling rain enveloped Riverbend in a gray veil, turning the streets into mirrors reflecting the dim light of the street lamps. In such weather, the town seemed even smaller and gloomier, as if shrinking under the cold drops. Daniel Hart sat in his car in front of the Pine Grove Motel, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. In the passenger seat lay a half-empty bottle of whiskey, his only companion for the past 3 days, ever since George Simmons had officially fired him from the sawmill. Next to it were documents from Ashley's lawyer demanding that he appear in court on charges of financial fraud. Everything was falling apart at an incredible speed. Just a month ago, he had a good job, a house, the respect of his neighbors, and secret meetings with Caitlyn that filled his life with excitement and hope for a new beginning. Now he had nothing but a room in a cheap motel and growing rage inside. His phone vibrated, a message from the real estate agent in Colorado. The buyer had pulled out of the deal after learning about the urgent sale. Now the house Daniel had spent his and Ashley's family savings on would be sold for much less, if it sold at all. Damn it! Daniel punched the dashboard. He didn't have the money to pay Ashley back. He didn't have a job to earn the money. And he didn't have Caitlyn, the reason he'd gotten himself into this mess. He took another swig from the bottle, feeling the alcohol burn his throat. He needed a plan, a way to fix everything, or at least keep things from getting worse. At the Hart house, Ashley was sorting the mail when the phone rang. It was Sheriff Warren. Ashley, it's Jim. I have news about the case. I'm listening. Ashley sat down on the couch, preparing herself for more bad news. Daniel won't be able to pay back all the money. The sheriff's voice sounded tired. He's selling his house in Colorado, but he'll get much less than he spent. Ashley closed her eyes. Somehow the news didn't make her angry, only tired and empty. How much will I get back? He said about $30,000. The rest, spent or lost in the rush to sell. Well, it's better than nothing. Ashley sighed. Jim, I've been thinking about our conversation. I don't want to pursue criminal charges. I just want a divorce and whatever he can pay back. Are you sure? The sheriff's voice sounded surprised. You have a strong case against him. I know, but a court battle will only drag this whole thing out. I want to move on. I understand. The sheriff paused. However, there's something else. After the incident at Maggie's house, I warned Daniel to stay away from both of you. But yesterday he was seen near the school where you work. And today, he was near the coffee shop where Caitlyn works. Ashley tensed. Is he stalking us? I can't say that yet. But be careful, and warn Maggie and Caitlyn. Thanks, Jim. Ashley hung up and immediately dialed her sister's number. Caitlyn was closing up the coffee shop when she noticed a familiar figure across the street. Daniel was standing under the store awning, watching her intently. When their eyes met, he took a step forward but stopped when he saw her reach for her phone. "Mom?" Caitlyn's voice was shaky. "Daniel is here, in front of the coffee shop." "Don't go out," Maggie said quickly and firmly. "Lock the door. I'm calling the sheriff and coming over." "Okay." Caitlyn stepped back into the coffee shop, her eyes fixed on Daniel's figure through the glass. "Hurry, please." She locked the door and lowered the blinds, but she could still see his silhouette through the slits. He wasn't leaving. He just stood there in the rain, staring at the closed door of the coffee shop. Her phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. "We need to talk. For the last time. I'm leaving town." Caitlyn didn't reply, but she felt a strange sense of relief. If he left, maybe it would all finally be over. The town gossip would die down, and she could try to mend her broken relationship with her mother and aunt. 10 minutes that felt like an eternity passed before Sheriff Warren's car pulled up outside the coffee shop. Daniel saw the police officer and raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. After a brief conversation, he left, glancing back at the coffee shop one last time. Caitlyn finally exhaled and opened the door for the sheriff. "Did he threaten you?" Warren asked as he got in. "Not directly," Caitlyn said, showing him the message on her phone. "He said he wanted to talk before he left." "He mentioned leaving to me too," the sheriff nodded. "He said that as soon as he sold the house and paid Ashley back, he'd leave Riverbend for good." "Do you believe him?" "I don't know." The sheriff looked thoughtfully out the window where Daniel had just been standing. "But I hope it's true. It'll be better for everyone if he leaves." A few minutes later, Maggie arrived, and Sheriff Warren kindly offered to drive them home. "Just in case," he said, although Caitlyn noticed how he kept scanning the streets, as if expecting to see Daniel again. That evening, Ashley decided to take a step she had been putting off for weeks. She got in her car and drove to Maggie's house. It was time to talk to her sister and niece face to face, without anger or accusations. It was time to begin the healing process. Maggie opened the door and raised her eyebrows in surprise, but stepped back silently, letting her sister inside. "Is Caitlyn home?" Ashley asked, taking off her wet coat. "In her room," Maggie pointed upstairs. "I'm not sure she's ready to talk." "I understand, but we have to start somewhere." Ashley looked determined, but Maggie noticed how nervously her sister was twisting her wedding ring, a habit that only appeared when she was extremely anxious. "I'll get her." Maggie went upstairs, leaving Ashley alone in the living room. She returned a few minutes later, followed by Caitlyn, who was walking uncertainly behind her. The young woman stopped at the door, hesitating to approach her aunt. "Hi, Caitlyn." Ashley tried to smile, but it came out forced. "Hi," Caitlyn replied quietly. Maggie sat down between them as if to act as a buffer. "Ashley wants to talk to us." "I'm not angry anymore," Ashley began, getting straight to the point. "At least, not at you. At Daniel, yes. At the situation, yes. But you are my family, the only family I have left." Caitlyn lowered her eyes. "I don't know what to say, Aunt Ashley. What I did, it was a mistake," Ashley finished gently. "We all make mistakes, Caitlyn. I wasn't a perfect wife or aunt either. But you didn't deserve to be betrayed like that." Caitlyn's voice trembled. "By your husband and by me." "No, you didn't," Ashley agreed. "But what happened happened. Now we have a choice. Either let it destroy our family completely, or try to save what can still be saved." Maggie took her sister and daughter by the hands. "I want us to be a family again so badly." "Me too." Ashley squeezed her sister's hand. Then she turned to Caitlyn. "I'm not asking you to forget or pretend that nothing happened. Just, let's try to move forward. Together." Caitlyn finally looked Ashley in the eyes, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "I want that more than anything in the world." The three women embraced, and although the tension had not completely disappeared, the first step toward reconciliation had been taken. At 11 o'clock that night, Daniel Hart pulled up to the house he once shared with Ashley. The light in the bedroom was on, which meant she was still awake. He sat in his car, watching the windows, gathering his courage for the conversation that was about to take place. In the glove compartment was the gun he had bought 2 days ago from a guy in a neighboring county. Not for Ashley, of course. He would never hurt her, just for safety. in case the conversation didn't go well, or if someone tried to stop him. Daniel wasn't sure when his thoughts had become so dark. Maybe when he lost his job, or when Caitlyn said it was over, or when he realized he couldn't pay back the money and avoid prosecution. But one thing he knew for sure: it couldn't go on like this. He couldn't just leave town defeated, disgraced, penniless. There had to be another way out. And if Ashley would just listen to him, maybe they could work something out together. He checked the gun, loaded, safety off, and put it back in the glove compartment. Then, taking a deep breath, he got out of the car and headed for the house he had once called home. Caitlyn couldn't sleep. Her conversation with Ashley had left her with a strange feeling. On the one hand, relief at taking the first step toward reconciliation, but on the other, deep sadness at realizing how much pain she had caused her beloved aunt. She got out of bed and went to the window. The rain had stopped, and stars were visible through the gaps in the clouds. Riverbend was quiet, with only the occasional car breaking the night's silence. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message from Daniel. "I'm at Ashley's house. I'm going to fix everything. Goodbye." Caitlyn reread the message several times, trying to understand its meaning. What did fix everything mean? And why did goodbye sound so final? A sudden panic gripped her. What if Daniel was planning something terrible? What if the message was some kind of suicide note? Or worse, a threat to Ashley? Without thinking, Caitlyn dialed her aunt's number. The phone rang, but no one answered. Then she called Sheriff Warren. "Sheriff? This is Caitlyn Foster. Daniel is at Ashley's house. He sent me a strange message. I'm afraid he might do something. I don't know. Dangerous." "I'm on my way," the sheriff replied curtly. "Try calling Ashley again, and don't you dare go there yourself." But Caitlyn was already pulling on her jeans and sweater. She couldn't just sit and wait if her aunt was in danger, especially danger she had brought upon her by her own actions. Ashley was just getting out of the shower when she heard the doorbell ring. She threw on a robe and glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. Who could be coming so late? Through the peephole, she saw Daniel. He looked sober and calm, not like the last time he came to Maggie's house. "What do you want?" she asked through the closed door. "To talk." His voice sounded tired. "For the last time, Ashley. I'm leaving tomorrow." Ashley hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore him, but another part, the part that had spent 15 years of her life with this man, needed closure, a final conversation, a chance to say everything that had been building up. "5 minutes," she finally said, opening the door, "and only in the living room." Daniel nodded and entered, trying not to get too close to her. He looked thin and exhausted, with more gray hair than Ashley remembered. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," he said, standing in the middle of the living room, not daring to sit down. "Speak." Ashley crossed her arms over her chest. "You have 5 minutes." "I sold the house," Daniel began. "Not for the full price, but I'll get about $30,000. All the money will be yours." "The sheriff already told me." "I know it's not enough, but it's all I have," Daniel said, lowering his eyes. "I'm sorry, Ashley, for the money, for the lies, for everything." "You're sorry you got caught." Ashley shook her head. "Not for what you did." "No." Daniel looked up. "I'm really sorry I hurt you. You were a good wife. You deserved a better husband." Ashley was silent, not knowing whether to believe him or not. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Daniel continued. "Far away from here. I'll start with a clean slate." "With Caitlyn?" Ashley couldn't hide the bitterness in her voice. "No," he shook his head. "She made it clear that it's over between us. And she's right. What we had, it was a mistake." "That's the smartest thing you've said in the last year." Ashley smiled weakly. Suddenly there was the sound of a car pulling up outside the house. A moment later there was a knock on the door and Sheriff Warren's voice. "Ashley? Are you okay? It's Jim." Ashley headed for the door, but Daniel suddenly grabbed her arm. "Wait, I'm not finished." "Let go of me, Daniel." She tried to break free, but his grip tightened. "No, you're going to listen to me." His voice changed, becoming harsher. "I'm losing everything because of you and your damn family, my job, my house, my money. Your actions led to this, not mine." Ashley tried to push him away, but Daniel was stronger. "Ashley!" The sheriff's voice became more insistent. "Open the door!" "It's okay, Jim!" Ashley shouted, hoping the sheriff would hear the tension in her voice. "Daniel, he's leaving!" "I'm not going anywhere until we're done," Daniel hissed, pulling her away from the door. "I had a plan, Ashley. A good plan. A new house. A new life. You ruined everything by exposing me. You ruined everything when you decided to cheat on me with my niece." Ashley finally broke free and backed up against the wall. "Get out of my house!" At that moment, the door flew open and Sheriff Warren entered with his gun drawn. Behind him stood Caitlyn, pale and frightened. "Hands where I can see them, Daniel," the sheriff said calmly, pointing his gun at Daniel. Daniel slowly raised his hands, but his eyes were fixed on Caitlyn. "You called the sheriff? After everything we've been through?" "I was afraid you'd do something terrible," Caitlyn replied quietly. "Your message sounded like a goodbye." "It would have been a goodbye if you'd all just left me alone." Daniel suddenly lunged for the door, pushing the sheriff and Caitlyn aside. What happened next happened so fast that later no one could remember the exact sequence of events. Sheriff Warren tried to grab Daniel, but slipped on the wet floor. Ashley rushed to Caitlyn, trying to pull her away from the enraged Daniel. Caitlyn screamed as Daniel grabbed her by the hair. Then a shot rang out. Time seemed to stand still. Everyone froze, shocked by the sudden sound. Then someone slowly collapsed to the floor, blood quickly spreading across their white shirt. "Oh my God," Ashley whispered, pressing her hand to her mouth. "Oh my God." Funerals in small towns are events that practically the entire town attends, even if the deceased wasn't particularly well-liked during their lifetime. The Riverbend Cemetery was covered in autumn leaves and chrysanthemums. Daniel Hart's coffin was slowly lowered into the ground as the priest recited a prayer in a monotonous voice. Those present stood in silence, many out of simple curiosity rather than respect for the deceased. Ashley Hart stood a little apart, dressed in a simple black dress, her expression impenetrable. Next to her was Maggie Foster, holding her sister's hand tightly. Caitlyn was not there. She was still in the hospital, recovering from surgery. "And we commit the body of Daniel Hart to the earth to earth, dust to dust, ashes to ashes." The priest's words dissolved in the cool air. When the ceremony ended, people began to disperse, whispering and exchanging glances. The story of Daniel's death became the main topic of conversation in the town for months to come. A week before the funeral, at the Riverbend County Hospital, Caitlyn Foster opened her eyes after the anesthesia wore off. The first thing she saw was her mother's worried face. "Mom?" Her voice was weak and hoarse. "I'm here, sweetheart." Maggie squeezed her daughter's hand. "Everything's fine." "What? What happened?" Caitlyn tried to sit up, but the sharp pain in her shoulder made her flinch. "Don't move," Maggie said gently. "The doctors say you're lucky. The bullet went right through without hitting anything vital." Memories began to return in fragments. Ashley's house, screams, Daniel pulling her by the hair, Sheriff Warren with his gun, the sudden pain in her shoulder. "Daniel?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from the look on her mother's face. "Dead," Maggie replied quietly. "Sheriff Warren shot him when Daniel pulled the gun from his waistband, but the bullet, it went through him and hit you." Caitlyn closed her eyes, feeling tears running down her cheeks. "Did he want to kill us?" "We don't know for sure." Maggie stroked her daughter's hair. "They found another gun in his car, and a note. Something like a suicide note. The sheriff thinks he didn't have a specific plan. He just snapped." "What about Aunt Ashley?" "She's okay. Shocked, of course. She's here in the hallway. Do you want her to come in?" Caitlyn nodded, and a minute later Ashley was standing by her bed, her eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry, Caitlyn," she said, gently taking her niece's hand. "If I hadn't opened the door..." "It's not your fault," Caitlyn smiled weakly. "No one's fault, except his." 3 months after the funeral, in the Riverbend Sheriff's Office, James Warren was closing the case on Daniel Hart's death. The investigation had ruled that the use of force was justified. Daniel had posed a direct threat to those present, and the sheriff had acted within the law. On the desk lay a letter found in Daniel's car. The sheriff read it one last time before filing it away. To whomever this may concern, I want you to know that I did not plan any of this. It started as a casual affair and ended up destroying my entire life. I am losing everything, and I have nothing left to lose. I am sorry if you can forgive me. Daniel. The sheriff closed the case file and set it aside. Some tragedies begin with a small lie that grows until it consumes everyone involved. This story will be told in Riverbend for years to come as a warning of what happens when betrayal and lies destroy family ties. In the spring, Caitlyn Foster stood at the Riverbend bus station with a single suitcase. Her mother and aunt were there to see her off. "Are you sure you don't want me to go with you, at least for a while?" Maggie asked, adjusting her daughter's scarf. "I'll be fine, Mom," Caitlyn smiled. "I need to do this on my own. Start with a clean slate. Call every day," Maggie hugged her daughter. "And come home for Thanksgiving. I promise." Caitlyn turned to Ashley. "Aunt Ashley." "I know." Ashley hugged her niece, trying not to touch her left shoulder where a bullet scar remained. "I'll miss you, and I'll wait for you to come back. Someday." Their relationship was still fragile, but over the past few months, it had begun to heal. Not as it had been before, deeper, more honest, with a painful awareness of how easily one could lose those they loved. When the bus pulled away, taking Caitlyn to her new life in Portland, Maggie and Ashley stood together. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Maggie asked. "Maybe," Ashley shrugged. "But maybe it'll be good for her to get away from Riverbend, away from all the memories, and away from the way people look at her." Maggie nodded. People have long memories in small towns. They walked to Ashley's car, who was now the assistant principal at the school, a promotion she deserved years ago but had put off because of Daniel. "Are you staying for dinner?" Ashley asked as she started the car. "I made my mom's lasagna." "I'd love to," Maggie smiled. "You know I've never been able to resist Mom's lasagna." "No one could," Ashley smiled back, and for a moment the sisters felt like little girls again, sharing secrets and dreams. That evening, Caitlyn watched the receding outline of Riverbend from the window of the departing bus. The town where she had grown up, the town where she had fallen in love and lost everything, grew smaller and smaller until it was a tiny dot on the horizon. She took a small notebook and pen out of her bag. The psychologist at the hospital had advised her to keep a journal, to write down her thoughts and feelings so she could understand them better and heal. "Today I left Riverbend," she wrote. "Maybe forever. There are too many memories here, good and bad, too many ghosts." She paused, thinking about Daniel, about how she had loved him sincerely, despite all his flaws, about how that love had destroyed so many lives. "I'll never know if he really loved me, or if I was just a way for him to feel young again. Did he want to kill us that night, or did he just lose control? Some questions will never be answered." She looked at her reflection in the dark glass, a 24-year-old woman with a scar on her shoulder and eyes much older than her age. "But I know one thing. I survived. And I'll keep on living one day at a time, because sometimes that's all we can do. Just keep on living." Outside the window stretched the endless fields of Missouri, and ahead lay an unknown future filled with possibilities and hope. A new chapter in her life was just beginning. In Riverbend, the story of romance, betrayal, and death gradually became a legend. A town tale told in bars and on porches, with details added with each retelling. But for those who lived through the tragedy, it remained forever real, a painful reminder of how easily lies can destroy even the strongest family bonds, and the price that must sometimes be paid for redemption.